Russian President Vladimir Putin says he agrees in principle with a proposal to end the fighting in Ukraine, but that any deal should lead to enduring peace. Speaking at a press conference in Moscow alongside his Belarusian counterpart, Putin thanked US President Donald Trump for the attention he has given to the conflict in Ukraine. US envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to meet Putin to discuss Washington's peace proposal. While Putin claimed to support an end to hostilities, he emphasised that many questions remain.
We
agree with the proposals to stop the fighting. But the ceasefire should be one that leads to a long-term peace. And eliminates the root causes of this crisis.
Meanwhile, in Washington, US President Donald Trump addressed the diplomatic efforts underway for a ceasefire in Ukraine during a press conference with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
At this moment, we have people talking in Russia. We have representatives over there, Steve Witkoff and others, and they're in very serious discussions. As you know, Ukraine has agreed, subject to this, what's happening today, to a complete ceasefire, and we hope Russia will do the same. We're getting words that things are going okay in Russia, and it doesn't mean anything until we hear what the final outcome is. But they have very serious discussions going on right now with President Putin and others, and hopefully they all want to end this nightmare. It's a nightmare. It's a horrible thing.
I'm joined by Doug Klain, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Centre in Washington, D.C. Doug, good to see you again. What options does US President Donald Trump have to make the Russian president agree to an immediate ceasefire? Does he have any leverage?
Well, of course, President Donald Trump has plenty of leverage over Russia. The key question is, does he choose to use it? Now, what's quite important, I think, for everybody to remember here is that Putin has not really changed his position from what it's been for the last 3 years. Today, we saw more of the same. Putin is banking on the fact that Trump or on the hope that Trump has not been listening to anything that Putin or Russia have said for the last 3 years. Putin said that he would support a ceasefire, but only if the conditions were changed. The United States and Ukraine said that they were ready to implement a ceasefire immediately with few preconditions. Russia has many preconditions, and the ones that Putin talked about today were that Ukraine would stop receiving military assistance, that it would effectively demobilize part of its military and stop recruiting new troops, and effectively weaken itself, leave itself open to future attack. Putin's goals haven't changed, and the way that he talked about a ceasefire really did not change today either.
So he's done a lot of talking. How often, Doug, do you think Vladimir Putin means what he says?
I think that he's quite clear about what he says. He just says it in a very roundabout way. We heard a clip from him earlier saying that Russia is open to a ceasefire, but that it has to address the root causes of the conflict. And in Putin's mind, the root causes of the conflict are that Ukraine is a sovereign state, that it is a state that asserts it's different from Russia, that it's a state trying to build a democracy and associate freely as any sovereign state does. That's too much for Putin. Those are many of the root causes in his mind, and it's what he has said for years. So when he says that he's willing to go for a ceasefire to end the war, well, he's always been willing to end the war, but he's always been willing to end the war with Russia's victory and Ukraine's surrender. And that's what we heard again today.
We know Putin thinks Kursk is important because he turned up there yesterday. He claims that Russia has retaken much of the territory in the region that Ukraine had held. How important do you think the loss of that bargaining chip might be for Ukraine in negotiations?
Well, Kursk was always a very useful thorn in Russia's side. I think that the Ukrainians always knew that it was never a very likely proposition that they would be able to trade the salient in Kursk for any sizable portion of territory that Russia is occupying in Ukraine. The Kursk salient was strong but small. What it really did for Ukraine was it slowed things down for Russia. It made it that if Russia wanted to simply freeze the lines of contact, that meant freezing and locking in an area of Russian territory in Ukrainian control. And that helped Ukraine to slow down this process and try to make sure it can get more leverage over Russia to get a better deal for itself. That's been one of the big goals for Putin, and I think it's part of the reason why he was quite hesitant to agree to any kind of U.S. proposed ceasefire without preconditions. If he agreed to simply freeze the lines where they were, that meant freezing Russian territory in Ukrainian control, and he's been working very hard to try to take it back, even bringing in North Korean troops to fight in a European war.
Doug Klain from the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Centre. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.